Hello.
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 Hi there.
Hello and welcome to the RadioTimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Hugh.
My name is Morgan.
And this week we're talking all things Series 12. And when I say all things, I mean all things, because we're talking about the whole series. Not for us this episode by episode nonsense anymore. Now we can look at the whole thing in the rearview mirror, the rear Who mirror.
Oh.
Yeah. Expect more of that. And yeah, just have a look at how it all worked, because before the series started, Chris Chibnall, who's the head writer, said you'll have more of a sense of how it all fits together at the end, which makes sense.
I think we do.
Yeah.
I think we do.
And, you know, I think, weirdly, I understand Series 11 more, having seen Series 12.
Okay, how so?
Well, you know, when Series 11 came out, Jodie Whittaker's first series, no returning monsters, not much of an arc, it's all fairly upbeat and not a lot of interpersonal drama, which is easy to forget now because we've had all that this series. And I feel like now in Series 12, a lot of that stuff works because we kind of did build up these characters a little bit. I know there was a bit of criticism that there wasn't loads of characterization in the first series, or serialization, but I think it works better in this series because we got to know them in the first series.
Yeah, true. I mean, you could argue, in many ways, Series 12 does feel intentionally or not like a response to Series 11, or at least like some sort of reaction to Series 11. And possibly that was all part of the Chibnall master plan. But I think you're right in that, much in the same way as, you know, the return of the Daleks or the return of the Cybermen or the return of the Master wouldn't have been as powerful if we hadn't been starved of classic elements and classic monsters in Series 11. So there's a slight tension between the Doctor and her companions that was a lot more appealing because of how their relationships had played out in the previous series.
That's exactly what I mean, yeah. And also, we got to remember, in 2018, it had been, you know, just over a year since we'd seen the Cybermen and Missy as the Master and all that stuff.
You have to give the fans time to miss them, right?
Exactly.
And, you know, arguably, Series 11 went a little too far. We could have had, you know, a little, you know, one or two more classic elements sprinkled throughout.
Yeah.
But definitely, you know, the absence of those characters and elements made the hearts grow fonder.
I knew you were going to say hearts. I knew you were going to say it. So then that's kind of brings us to Series 12, which we knew from the start there was going to be a lot of extra stuff. We knew the Cybermen were going to be in it beforehand. We knew the Jadoon were back. You know, and we knew that we'd heard there were going to be multi-part episodes, more of an arc and all this stuff. There was a lot they weren't telling us.
Yeah.
We were kind of, the first series as well was very secretive, right? Series 11 barely knew anything. This series, they were saying quite a lot, oh yeah, Cybermen are in and stuff. And we were like, why are they revealing all this stuff?
We should have been more suspicious, really. Well, Series 11, it was odd, they were secretive when really there wasn't that much to conceal. Whereas this time they were giving more away and we thought, oh, maybe they're just, you know, trying a different approach, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it turns out they were hiding so much
Reveals
more.
within reveals.
Yeah.
We learned the Jadoon were in an episode. We're like, oh, what a great bit of information, which is like the most irrelevant bit of that episode.
Oh, I know what the Jadoon are hiding. Captain Jack. Oh,
no, it's the new Doctor.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. It's a different approach. I feel like it's been more exciting this year.
Definitely. And I don't know if that's just that it's leaned more heavily on, you know, the story arc and on you know, elements that will excite fans, you know, things like the Master and Cybermen and Time Lords and Gallifrey. So maybe that's just my fan gene being tickled, but I feel like this series has had more of a sense of pace. You know, I think just having a stronger story arc has sort of powered us through the series, and even though it hasn't loomed large, or the various story arcs haven't loomed large in every episode, it has felt like there's been more of an engine kind of fueling this series.
Exactly, yeah. Even just for little bits at the end of the episode saying, oh, let's go to Madagascar, or like, oh, let's go and hang out with Mary Shelley. You know, just those little bits kind of keep us ticking over in a way. All the other episodes in Series 11 felt quite, you know, self-isolated and static, bar episode 1 and 2.
And I think one of the criticisms that Series 11 came in for was that there wasn't a huge amount of character development in for the companions in particular, or the Doctor, really. And Series 12, certainly for the Doctor, has delivered that. Maybe it could still do a little more with the companions, but it did have a little more of that kind of evolution. You saw episodes like Can You Hear Me, in particular, you know, it did feel like we were sort of checking in with how the companions were doing.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned before, you know, seeing it as a response. Chris Chibnall has said that he didn't really look at any of the response to Series 11. Don't know to what extent we can take that at face value, but
he would say that.
Somebody in Doctor Who must read it all.
Yeah.
And we actually wrote a piece in 2019. We surveyed a group of Doctor Who fans asking what they wanted for Series 12. And I was looking over it today, and it's kind of astonishing how...
It's quite remarkable
how much of it is in there. Like, really specifically, some of it was literally like, we want more two-parters. Well, you got that. We want a series arc. That's in there.
Cold open.
We want more cold opens. We want, you know, more a darker storyline for the Doctor. Got that. We want some classic monsters. Cybermen, all that. we want Captain Jack to come back. Fine, we'll do that as well.
Well, and it's interesting with that because some of those demands are things that fans have been saying for years. We want Captain Jack to come back, and in a way, this series just so happened to be the one where Captain Jack came back.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But having said that, some of those requests and the responses, they seem very specific. Things like we want to see a darker side to the Doctor's character, and we did. Things like the cold open. That's very specific. It makes you wonder if someone was reading.
And fine, we'll do the bloody cold open. I think to an extent, it might be that the point, like you said, was for fans to want this stuff again, having been denied it.
And also, a lot of those things that fans were requesting for Jodie Whittaker's second series and Chris Chibnall's second series, they are
kind of obvious things.
A natural evolution, right?
Yeah.
So, as we were saying, because you play the Doctor quite happy-go-lucky in Series 11, the only way to go really is to make her slightly less happy-go-lucky in Series 12.
Exactly. Like Matt Smith started out relatively happy. David Tennant started out pretty happy. He's got more miserable as time went on.
Well, as we established, every David Tennant series ends with him sad in the TARDIS. And things like, we'll have more standalone episodes, and then so we'll do something different. We'll now have more two-parters, and we'll have more of a story arc. And
maybe next time it'll be back to the standalone episodes.
Yeah. Well, it was what Stephen Moffat used to do, and he would quite openly say, sort of, I do something different every single series. Once because you have to have a selling point. So one series was it's a blockbuster movie every week, and then the next year people were like, well, we want two-parters, and he was like, great, we've got two-parters.
They're now all two-parters.
Yeah. There was a series that was all two-parters and three-parters, and then people were like, oh, we're sick of this. We want the standalone storytelling again. And so, I think the fans are always going to want what they don't have. And so. Possibly that this series was a response to what fans were calling out for, but possibly it was just what Chris Chibnall was always planning from the beginning.
Speaking of beginnings, the plan is to go briefly through each episode. So we've got to start from the very beginning, a very good place to start. Cast your minds back to New Year's Day 2020. Feels like a very long time ago.
It does feel. Spyfall feels like so long ago. So much has happened.
Partly because we saw it in mid-December.
Yeah, but even so, like just in terms of everything that's happened in Doctor Who since then. It just feels like yonks ago, doesn't it?
It is mad to think that before that had even aired, they had filmed obviously all of the Timeless Children and all the Master stuff in there, and he had done that whole thing without anyone knowing he was the Master, or not very many people. That is crazy. I mean, that is the big bit of that episode, but in general, I mean, looking back, it's weird because we obviously reviewed every episode week to week. Sometimes with a bit more time you get a bit more perspective. I did still like Spyfall though. Weirdly at the time, I think I kind of had it where I really enjoyed the story and actually thought the Master reveal didn't work that well. I've kind of flipped on it a bit. I do now think the Master reveal worked well. I just kind of needed to watch it a couple more times.
And also the story now, that story is so interesting because the first time you watch it, it kind of in isolation, without knowing what's coming for the rest of the series, without having seen the rest of the series, it feels like this, the story itself, the story of the Kasavan and so on, feels very exciting. Now, seeing it in the context of the series, I still really like that two-parter, but it does feel like its purpose was to bring back the Master, and everything else was kind of set dressing, which you don't get at the time because you don't know to what extent the Kasavan are going to play out throughout the series.
I thought Daniel Barton might come back.
Right, exactly.
Poor Lenny Henry.
Exactly. So I feel I still really like that two-parter, or especially part one. I think part one is stronger than part two.
I think so too. Part two felt like it had a lot. Well, we'll include that in our review. Part two felt like it had a lot to play around with. I think even at the time we said it felt like there were too many storylines. They added in two new historical characters from two different time periods. I still don't understand why the Kasavan was stalking Ada Lovelace.
No.
At all.
They blew through a lot in part two. And as I say, the Spyfall now feels slightly different in the sense of everything else that's going on around the Doctor and the Master relationship feels a lot more disposable than maybe it did on first watch.
Totally. I mean, it's funny as well to think that whole second episode is the Doctor versus the Master and his big scheme, and actually then that happens again at the end of a series with a completely different sort of set of things. I'm like, what was he messing around with all that for? Why was he bothering?
Also, I think watching Sacha Dhawan's performance, which obviously is a big part of part two in particular, his performance as the Master, and then seeing it in contrast to his performance in The Timeless Children is interesting because it is significantly different, I think.
I think so too.
He's a lot more kind of light and comic book villain in Spyfall, which is he's still really great in it, but there's a little bit more of like a dangerous, unhinged, quite tragic edge to his performance in Timeless Children. I don't know if he watched himself back and thought, I'm going to approach this slightly differently,
or maybe he just wanted to reveal more layers as he went along,
which would make sense, right? So when he first appears, he's kind of like your classic basic master in the nicest possible sense, you know. And then he's, as you say, he's kind of like peeling back the layers and revealing something a bit dark and a bit more disturbing in the finale.
Speaking of dark and disturbing, we should move on to episode 3.
Yeah.
Orphan 55.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I was kind of gutted after watching that episode.
Yeah.
Not because it was like the worst episode ever or anything. I just sort of had been super excited that Doctor Who was bringing back series lore and cliffhangers and sort of arc storytelling.
Yeah.
And then we just got dumped into this story about the standalone story, but didn't particularly excite me. Had a lot of characters. I didn't think it was particularly scary with the dregs or anything.
No.
I just felt a bit like sad after watching it, and I'm sorry.
No, well, again, Orphan 55, it frames slightly differently now you've seen it in the context of the series.
Weirdly, I sort of like it more
Really?
in
Oh, okay.
hindsight. Well, no, just in terms of like, I don't mind the environmental message as much. I'm sort of like, oh yeah, that was the environmental one this year. Like, I sort of class it. I don't really mind it as much. I mean, I don't think I'd rewatch it.
No. Well, I think at the time, it was underwhelming anyway, because it came after Spyfall Part 1 and Part 2, which were good, and also it had been bigged up at the time as this is going to be one of the scariest episodes of Doctor Who of all time. The dregs are one of the scariest monsters the Doctor's ever encountered. So it had weirdly, it was one of the most hyped episodes of Series 12. And so it was kind of disappointing when it turned out to be not all that.
It was a lot of like comedy aliens, quite bad costumes sort of running around. And where's my Benni?
Benni! I mean, I love the Benni memes.
Yeah, that's been worth it actually.
That has been worth. That's the one thing that Orphan 55 has given us. But I think I like it even less in context of the series, because when it aired, you were like, well, that wasn't great. I sort of hope the series picks up. And as we'll get onto, it very much did. So now it really does feel like it sticks out like a sore thumb. It feels like the one real stinker from an otherwise quite impressive series.
I mean, moving on to episode 4, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, which is a great title. It's a funny one because, again, at the time I was like, what a great fun episode.
Yeah.
I sort of forget it now.
Yeah.
Like, not in a bad way. It's just, it feels weirdly even more to me of an odd one out than Orphan 55 in that it's a very competent, like, fun adventure, but just does not feel connected to the rest of the series.
No.
Really. You could have put it in the last series and you wouldn't really notice.
Yeah, no, again, like in context of the series, my opinion of it kind of totally changes. And I really, really enjoyed that one when I first watched it, because it had come after Orphan 55, and I was like, okay,
yeah, that's true. That's what helped.
The show's back on track. And you're right, it doesn't do anything wrong particularly. I think it's a really strong episode, but also, is it one I'm going to go back and revisit time after time? Probably not, and it's not. It's almost not that episode's fault, because it does everything you want it to do. It's just it's overshadowed now by everything that came later, the more spectacular episodes that followed.
Also, I think it's overshadowed a little by the historicals in Series 11, which were definitely the strongest part of Series 11. Right, Rosa and Demons of the Punjab are both tell these very emotional, like interesting stories.
Yeah,
and they did that a little with Tesla, with him being an immigrant and basically his like kind of background. But I feel like it was kind of more like, oh yeah, let's meet Tesla and do some adventures. Like, it didn't really have a really big emotional heart to it, I don't think.
No, and it didn't have anything to say really,
No,
or
really.
Or certainly not as much to say as an episode like. I think pretty much everyone agrees that Rosa is terrific and Demons of the Punjab is a little bit more divisive. This one felt a little bit more like a throwback. It was a more simplistic way of telling a historical story, a bit more of a just sort of a fun roller coaster, a bit of a romp. And I like those stories, and I still maintain that is a good episode, but that's all it is. It's a good episode. It's maybe not a great episode, and it's certainly not as memorable as what followed.
Yeah, because what followed was massive. I mean, it was such more of an impact even than the finale, episode 5. I think because people didn't really expect anything from it. And I've said this before, but I was watching the last bit, the big revelations. I don't remember how, but I was standing up. Like, I don't really remember standing up.
Shaking.
Yeah. I was genuinely so excited. I mean, in a way that Doctor Who hadn't made me feel for a really long time.
Yeah.
I know it was slightly ruined for you because I spoiled some of the twists for you, sorry. But it was just such a sort of surprise moment, like, because we knew some of what was coming ahead, but we had no idea about this new Doctor or anything. Like, and you see Captain Jack arrive, which is, we're sort of like, oh yeah, remember when Jack came back? That is like a bizarre thing to have happened. Like, people talked it's been a decade.
Yeah,
people have talked for years about getting Jack back. It felt as pie in the sky as like, oh yeah, Billy Piper's coming. We're going to get the Meta Crisis Doctor's going to get his own series. It's like that kind of level of fan wish. So we talked about this before, but we did a podcast a year or so ago.
And called it like a pipe dream.
Yeah, pie in the sky.
But I think we were right. It was a pipe dream. And just because it came true doesn't make it any less absurd that it happened.
And then that's not even the main talking point of the episode.
No.
It's like, oh yeah, remember that bit was in it as well.
It's like a distractionary tactic.
Yeah.
It's interesting of Fugitive of the Jadoon because I think it's a really great episode and it sort of set Series 12 off in a totally different direction to where you thought it was heading or to where it seemed to be heading.
It seemed so completely separate from the Timeless Child stuff as well at the start and the Master. Like, how does this connect?
Yeah.
It was a great mystery.
But also, although it does kind of give the series like a fresh energy, it's interesting because it makes the series, as again, looking back on it as a whole, makes it feel, I don't know, slightly kind of lopsided, slightly
it peaks in the middle.
Yeah, well, not only that, but also like it almost makes the first 4 episodes feel like a waste of time almost, which is
I think that's a bit strong.
No, it is too strong. But like I was saying, like the first 2 episodes are great, more than 55, not so great. But then the 4th one is great, but they feel a little inconsequential.
Yes,
given that Fugitive of the Jadoon then just set us spiraling off into this totally crazy new direction, and it was like, I don't know. We've talked previously about should Series 12 have opened with that, or even Series 11 closed.
I think Series 11 closing with it would have worked quite well. I think like that, setting up that mystery.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would work because it's actually, I think it is like the cheapest episode they actually made this year. Because it's just basically all in just Gloucester.
Yeah, with some Jadoon.
Yeah, but I mean, watching it, there was a bit of me saying, why don't they just do it like this every week?
Yeah. No, it's a spectacular episode, but it's just, its placement is odd. And I feel like it leaves the series as a whole feeling like it unfolds in a slightly odd way.
I guess one thing you could argue is that it really drummed up interest again midway through the run, and like really like it had quite a good afterlife on iPlayer, I think, comparatively. And you know, I feel like it kind of brought people in and had people talking about Doctor Who, you know, a month into the run when maybe normally it's fizzling out a bit.
Yeah, well, that's bound to be the thinking behind it, isn't it? That, you know, you launch strong and you finish strong, and then there's like, well, we'll throw this huge, spanner in the works in a good way into the middle that will immediately get people talking about Doctor Who again. When, as you say, it's mid-series and ratings and sort of interest are generally at their lowest.
Yeah. We can't talk about this for too long, but it was such a big episode, it's hard not to. One thing I will say as well is that as much as we all focus on the big twists and developments and stuff, I do actually think it's a really nicely written episode anyway. It's very sharp. I think the dialogue's nice with some good jokes, you know, Jadoon by the lagoon or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think there's some nice characterization, like Neil Stuke's very good. Joe Martin's great, obviously.
Yeah, it's almost like underselling it to just talk about the twist, isn't it?
Yeah, but we're limited for time. But just to say, like, I was enjoying it anyway.
Yeah.
Just as like a Jadoon episode, I was enjoying it. And the mystery, when you don't know what's going on with Ruth and it's great. It's just really, I'm rushing through all these theories in my head. It's definitely one to watch live, I think. Like, if you'd sort of read about it, I think it would have ruined it. And I hadn't seen, leaks about that specifically or anything.
No.
So it was a really well-kept secret. Next week, we are a bit more divided. We didn't actually talk about Praxeus at the time.
No, I wasn't here for
because you weren't here.
Praxeus.
And I know that you quite liked it. I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was okay.
My thing with Praxeus, I get why people... Well, I get one of the reasons people didn't like Praxeus was because after that huge arc episode, it kind of just went back to business as usual, which I totally accept is odd. I feel like they should have touched on it a little, even if you just have one of the companions say, hey, Doctor, what about this? What about Jack's warning? And she says like, oh, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm busy.
I'm going off on my adventure, whatever. I just thought, much like episode 4, I thought Praxeus was an episode that didn't get a lot wrong or much at all wrong. I thought it had an interesting concept. I thought it looked great. I thought it had really strong supporting performances for the most part, like Warren Brown and Matthew McNulty in particular. I really enjoyed the climax in particular because I thought they were going a very specific way with the relationship between Adam and Jake, their characters, and I was convinced they were going to kill off Warren Brown. It's the old bury your gays trope, and I was like, oh, here we go again. And then when Warren Brown didn't die, I was almost like, yeah, come on, I cheered a little bit. I just thought it was a really sort of feel good, exciting episode. Nothing out of the ordinary necessarily, but I just thought it was a solid episode done really well.
It left me a bit cold, to be honest. Like, I don't disagree with any of that in of itself. I mean, I felt like I got a bit irritated by all the guest cast, just the sheer amount of them.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I'm trying to remember now. I'm sort of trying to summon my opinions from several weeks ago. I remember I liked it for a while, and just sort of found the ending a bit meh, to be honest. And then that slightly coloured my perception of the rest of it. I thought it was okay. I guess I also just kind of wanted the Autons to be in it, and I thought that would have been a really cool idea.
A lot of people thought Sea Devils.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
I think it felt, like you said, it felt a bit inconsequential, and I just felt like, for me, it was just kind of, it sounds bad. It's not nearly as, I didn't dislike it nearly as much as I didn't like Orphan 55. I'm trying to be nice. But it was probably my second least favourite of the series.
I think, the strange inner conflict of the Doctor Who fan is you watch Doctor Who and you sort of enjoy it, but you're also sort of waiting for something to go wrong, for there to be a naff line of dialogue, because you love the show so much and you want it to be good so badly. You're just sort of almost waiting for there to be a slightly naff monster or a slightly naff line. And for me, I just sat there and I thought, well, this for me is getting everything right. And so, although it does have its problems, at the time I sort of didn't pick up on any of them. I just enjoyed the ride.
Well, this is the thing, because I think this is exactly how I felt about the next episode, episode 7, where we kind of flip positions, where I would know totally what people say when they're like, can you hear me? Oh, I didn't like this bit, I didn't like that bit. For me, just the sort of vibe of it and the emotion of it pulled me through really well. As much as I'm like, the other villain alongside Zelen was a bit off, and the plan was a bit vague, and it was a bit unclear what happened at the end. I just thought the aesthetic was great. I thought Zelen was a really cool villain. I really liked the concept. There's definitely a few plot holes, but I just thought that like amazing animated sequence, I know it's odd, but just all the things kind of came together. I think it's maybe a slight difference in the sort of Doctor Who episodes you and I like. That's as well.
Probably,
which is good. And I don't know. It's one of the things where like, I could sort of be like, I totally, same with you in practices. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. It's just I didn't care about that bit.
I think we feel exactly the same about those two different episodes, in that I liked a lot of the elements of Can You Hear Me? Like I thought Zelen was a great villain. I really liked there's some great moments in there. There's no such thing as the boogeyman. That's not true.
That should have been the opening scene.
Yeah, spectacular, so good. And dealing in mental health and the fact that we got like more character development for Yaz in one episode than we'd had in like a series and a half prior to that. I thought that was great. Introducing a best friend for Ryan, kind of fleshing him out a little bit. There was a lot in it that worked, but ultimately mostly the ending, actually, it fell apart a little bit for me. And so it was sort of like the parts didn't quite, come together.
I also quite liked that there was a little timeless child flash forward.
Yes.
Which I like. One of the things I found slightly frustrating this year is that they'd had an arc, but they often didn't really do much with it. Like they'd sort of check in every so often. The arc this year was kind of just, what is the timeless child? Hey, look, that might be the timeless child. Okay, this is the timeless child.
Yeah.
It didn't really progress. We should quickly talk about episode 8, The Haunting of Villa Diodati. So you've talked about reevaluating episodes. At the time, I quite liked that. I think I really like it now.
I really liked it at the time.
Yeah, I know a lot of people did. I quite liked it, but it's sort of, without rewatching it even, in my head, it's sort of grown to be better than I thought at the time.
I think that was probably, I think it's fair to say, this series, the most popular episode with fans, right? It was the least divisive episode.
Yeah, I think that's fair, actually. Like, I think it was just full of a lot of cool ideas.
Yeah.
Just some great, I've said aesthetics quite a lot today, but the look of the Lone Cyberman, instantly, the worst kept secret in Doctor Who history. Oh, it's about ghosts. We think everyone in the world knew that Cybermen turned up in this story.
Well, also you go Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
The half man, half machine creation. You go,
what's like that?
Like if they didn't have a Cyberman,
the Zygons.
if they didn't have a Cyberman in it, it'd be a huge waste, right?
Yeah.
So it's good that they did. No, that episode was great. It was moody. It looked fantastic. All of the sort of the lead cast got some fun stuff to do. Supporting cast, I thought, were really, really good as well. And you had a Cyberman in there.
Yeah.
It was
quoting Shelley.
Quoting Shelley. It was spooky. It ticked all the boxes, right? And I feel like, I hope, because the finale, Timeless Children in particular, has been a little bit more divisive, and in a way that episode sets up the finale. I hope that people now who didn't like the finale won't go, that was
that big part of that.
Yeah,
so it's tainted.
It's somehow tainted that story, because I think even if you didn't enjoy the finale, that's still a great episode, right?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it's really cool. And that's an example for me where I've complained a couple of times about large guest casts. In this one, I felt like they all needed to be there. I felt like, partly because historically they were all there, but they all had a function, right? They all were doing something in the story. Even if Claremont had a bizarre subplot where she learned to love herself in the midst of this Cyberman attack, and Byron was a wuss.
But they all had a little bit of colour and a little bit of personality. Which we've talked a lot about this series about how there's too many guest cast, and it's probably not any more guest characters than in an episode from a few years ago. It's just we have more leads now to cater to as well.
Yeah.
But I think as long as they're kind of, sharply and cleverly drawn, you can have, 4 or 5 guest characters. It's just in other episodes, they were more flatly written.
I think that's the point, isn't it? It's like you don't know if it works when you don't notice it. It's only when it doesn't work that you notice it.
Right, yeah.
We should talk about the companions in a minute. I mean, maybe after we talk about the finale, though, because we went straight from 8 into episode 9, Ascension of the Cybermen, which I think, with hindsight, I preferred to The Timeless Children.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, I said this at the time. I really liked them kind of refocusing a story to be just about the Cybermen. Famous last words. The last episode was not about the Cybermen at all.
No.
But, I kind of thought that might happen. But it has such a cool cold open, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's the Cybermen. I thought they did a really nice job, factoring in Cyberman history and those sort of battered old Cybus era Cybermen. I love those. I thought the Lone Cyberman was very cool. I know a lot of people like him. I think, he had the potential to be quite a cool, long-running villain. Unfortunately, not realised. I mean, who knows? You never know.
It's just like, come back in the next series. Like, really, really small. The thing is, with that episode, it's really exciting, action-packed. Again, great guest performances. Again, the lead cast are quite well catered for. And the other thing is that setup, right, is always going to be more satisfying than payoff, ultimately. Because... it just is. The payoff can never necessarily match what you think it's going to be or what you're expecting. So Fugitive of the Jadoon throws loads of crazy ideas at us, which we weren't expecting, right? So we're like, oh, this is amazing. And then Ascension of the Cybermen, builds and builds. It's a whole episode of build-up, right? I remember you saying that you felt quite tense throughout it.
Yeah, I did. I sort of was filled with a sense of dread for some reason. I felt like something really bad was going to happen.
Because that whole episode is this brilliant slow burn, building and building and building until the master bursts out of the boundary and everything is going to change. And then you have The Timeless Children, and no matter what you think of that episode,
it's very different.
Yeah, and it's all payoff, right? It's essentially just talking through everything you wanted to know.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's never going to be as dramatically satisfying as this incredible building of tension that was Ascension of the Cybermen.
I think Timeless Children's an interesting one because I feel like it's people who didn't enjoy it are divided between people who didn't like the changes made to canon. The Doctor has the All These Other Lives, blah, 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 and people who just genuinely didn't enjoy the episode. I think there's a mix. Because I think that's fair enough to not like anything. I sort of don't mind the revelations, but even watching it, I could see the odd thing where I was like, I wish she had some actual Time Lords to confront. It seems odd that it's just her.
Yeah.
I wish that maybe the Master hadn't killed all of them.
It's definitely an imperfect episode.
Yeah.
And I say that while having very little issue with any of the changes made.
And I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time I saw the Cyber Masters or whatever they're called. I don't know why they're called Cyber Masters because they're not masters anyway. But yeah, the Cyber Lords.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, those are naff. And then within about 5 minutes, I was like, oh, they're great.
It's quite fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I think that episode, as I mentioned in our review at the time, it's very, very talky. The Doctor is quite inactive, but I found it really exciting watching it because the things the Master is talking to the Doctor about are these huge elements of lore that are being changed and everything's being thrown out the window, and you're just like, oh, this is exciting. She's not from Gallifrey and all this kind of stuff. But actually, if you boil it down, he's just sort of telling her a bunch of stuff.
He's reading her the TARDIS wiki.
Yeah, exactly. He's reading her the TARDIS wiki. You thought you knew this? That's not true. Look, and he's just going through this shopping list of...
well, actually.
Shopping list of trivia points that he's crossing off one by one and going, that's not true, that's not true.
Yeah.
And is that dramatically satisfying? It is if you're a Doctor Who fan because you know all the context and you know how big a deal it is. But does it work as a sort of straightforward Sunday night drama in a way that Haunting of Villa Diodati did or Ascension of the Cybermen did? I would say probably not, or at least not as well.
Yeah, I think I can see where people are coming from, but I do feel like the tenor of debate has become quite charged.
Yeah.
When it comes to Doctor Who, I mean, I wrote this in a piece earlier this week, but it kind of sometimes feels like if you and I say, oh, we really like this episode, everyone says, BBC shills, and if we say, oh, actually, here's a bit I didn't like, how can you do the show like this? How can you not support Doctor Who? It needs your help.
We like some, we don't like others.
Yeah, basically, it's a funny one, and I can sort of see. I think both groups kind of end up. Sort of, I mean, I think the sort of more negative people, it's certainly online are in the majority, but I feel like those extreme reactions kind of breed more extreme reactions because you kind of react to what the other people say.
Yeah, it's polarizing, right? So
that's the word.
The stronger the negative reaction, the stronger the positive reaction.
Yes,
and it becomes difficult to meet in the middle somewhere and go, well, I liked this bit and I didn't like this bit, and this was only okay.
Yeah, it doesn't. People don't think you're talking in good faith, and it's bizarre that we're talking about that about Doctor Who and not like politics. Everyone's opinions, subjective, right?
Yeah.
And which sounds like a weird defense of reviews in general, but it's just something I've noticed more this year, and I don't know whether that's just a product of. Part of me wonders if it's because this series has had so much positive reaction, it has brought more people out of the woodwork who weren't enjoying it anyway, but maybe weren't saying it. Do you know what I mean? Like, because people have been excited, they've been like affronted, they've been like, how can you be excited by this nonsense?
I did see one comment that said, I've been subjected to another episode of Doctor Who, and it's like, who's tying you down and making you watch this?
I saw a great comment that said like, I can't remember what it was. It was something like, they said, Doctor Who will return this Christmas.
Yeah.
And the person said, it's I needed this good news because I've been so upset since the last episode. I hated it. I can't wait for the next one. That is just typical Doctor Who fan.
It really is. Yeah, I think the thing is we liked Series 12.
Yeah.
Didn't like all of it. Loved some of it, right?
Yeah, totally. I felt more passionate about it than I have for a while, for good and ill, I think. And that's been fun, it's been fun to talk about. And it's interesting, but because it feels like there's a lot more interest this year, we should talk briefly about the ratings and things like that. The TV ratings in the UK have gone down a bit, especially Jodie Whittaker's first series had quite high ratings. I do feel like I get why people are concerned. Doctor Who's kind of a complicated show. It's not fully funded by the BBC. It has some commercial concerns, so it can still be profitable. I mean, the BBC doesn't make profit exactly anyway. It's sort of complicated.
It's very complicated, and we probably can't boil it down.
Not easily. But the thing I would say is I feel like the ratings being what they are for the finale and so on, like slightly under 4 million for the thing, that is kind of what it was like at the end of Peter Capaldi's era. Like, it's maybe slightly lower, slightly higher. I feel like, if anything, Jodie's first series was a bit of a blip when people were very interested.
Yeah, well, and I hate to use this word, but what people would have at least seen as the novelty of the first female Doctor would have naturally attracted people for the first, or maybe even the second, or maybe even the third episode, who wouldn't naturally have tuned in. And then naturally, that's going to flatten out a little bit, right?
And if this series had come right after Peter Capaldi's series, people wouldn't notice maybe. If it had been the next Peter Capaldi series and was delivering these ratings, that would have been pretty similar.
But the ratings have gone down a little bit, but as you say, Doctor Who is it's still, broadly speaking, a big commercial success all around the world, and also it fulfills a very specific thing, I think, for the BBC. Not just that it nostalgia or anything like that. It's a rare example of sort of a family show, and of science fiction and fantasy. It ticks a box that not a lot else on the BBC ticks. You've maybe got one or two more modern examples, something like His Dark Materials, maybe, but this even skews slightly younger, I would say, or at least can be watched by slightly younger viewers. So it fulfills something that no other show fulfills. So I don't think the BBC is in any particular rush to yank it from the schedules, as some doomsayers may be fearing.
Yeah, totally. And, I think the thing people always say about Doctor Who is, if you don't like it now, you'll like it again later.
This is always my thing as well, is like, if this isn't your favourite era of Doctor Who, and it's not some people's favourite era of Doctor Who, it'll change again in a few years.
Yeah.
And you might not like that either, but then it'll change again in a few years more. Or you might love that, and then you'll be saying, oh, why did that Doctor leave? Why did that showrunner leave? People were quite hard on Stephen Moffat at the time.
People were hard on Russell T Davies at the time.
This is the one thing people forget. People were hard on Stephen Moffat, and now they say he was, we didn't know how good we had it with Moffat.
Yeah.
Chip, no. But people were hard on Russell T Davies at the time. There was all kinds of nonsense about, he had this agenda and all this kind of thing. And
it was too soapy.
Yeah, it was too soapy, exactly. Oh, I hate Mickey, I hate this, I hate that. So, and now it's all, burping bins. People
oh God, yeah.
People went nuts. And now, both him and, to a lesser extent, Stephen Moffat are kind of held up as they're
canonised.
Yeah, no pun intended. Yeah, they're like seen as like the gods of Doctor Who, and what we would give to have another episode by those guys. Everything has its strengths, everything has its weaknesses, everything has its fans, everything has its detractors, right?
Everything has its time.
Exactly.
Look, I think we probably have to cut it at some point because we've been talking for absolutely ages about.
And we could talk about Doctor Who forever.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting series. You can see some running stuff. It's been a bit darker. I think they kind of learned how to write the companions, but only by putting them somewhere else from the Doctor every week. That's a weird sort of running theme. This series was the companions constantly being separated from the Doctor.
Yeah,
especially towards the end.
But sometimes it has given them the breathing room that they need, right? Because there are. There are a lot. I didn't say too many companions, but there are a lot of companions. You have to deal with 4 leads, every single week, and to give them.
Well, we usually had 2.
Right.
For years.
Yeah, and to give them, to give 3 companions something meaty to sink their teeth into, is, within this structure of a big, exciting adventure story that has to appeal to, young kids as well as older viewers. That's tough, right? There are rumors doing the rounds that there may not be as many companions going forward,
or the lineup might be a little bit different. Anyway.
Yeah, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. I feel like this for Lee's, it's been an interesting experiment. Maybe not always wholly successful, but when it does work, I think it works really well.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of that this series.
Yeah, it's definitely worked better this series than in the previous series. It feels like they had more of a handle on how to do it.
I feel like that's a good way of summing up the whole thing, to be honest. It felt like a lot of stuff they were trying out in Series 11, they kind of really got a handle on in Series 12. Not to sound patronising, because we don't make TV. We're not claiming that we would make better Doctor Who. We would make way worse Doctor Who.
I actually think I would. No, of course not.
Bring back the Candyman. But yeah, I feel like it felt like a more assured. It felt more like Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And it is funny how we went from, wouldn't it be nice to hear the Doctor mention the Daleks to, so the Morbius Doctors are canon again?
Yeah. It was definitely a series that you could not have predicted.
No.
Especially after Series 11. Like if
you told me this, a few months ago, I would have said you were mad. Oh, the Master's back, played by Sacha Dhawan. Oh yeah, John Barrowman's back. There's a new Doctor. The Morbius Doctors are canon. Oh yeah, there's a half-human Cyberman who's who thinks he's the cyber god. I'd be like, yeah, all right, mate. We'll get ready for the return of the Stenza.
and Series 12 has been so radically different to Series 11 in so many ways. It just makes you think, what the heck is Series 13 going to be like? Is it going to be more like 11, quite like 12, or something totally different and unexpected again?
Yeah, and we'll be talking in the next edition of this podcast about Series 13, what we know so far and what we would like to know. I mean, maybe that's something you could let us know in the comments of this podcast. If you have some thoughts on what you would like gone, what you would like added, characters you'd like to see return, things like that.
I was going to say you can't ask for Captain Jack to come back anymore, but you can.
Ask him to come back more.
We want more. We want Barrowman in every single episode.
Yeah. There might be a space on the TARDIS. Can you imagine? But yeah, for now though, we've kind of we'll put Series 12 to rest. I'm sure we'll still be talking about it. We've got quite a long time to talk about it. Quite a while till the next episode, and even longer till the next series. But it's been really fun chatting about this series with you. As I've said before, we're going to keep the podcast going, talking about different stuff, which you'll sort of see more of after next week. But for now, these have been our reviews of Series 12, all wrapped together in a neat little bow. And I've been Hugh Fullerton.
I've been Morgan Jeffery.
And thank you very much for listening.